So I've just finished week 1 of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's a book that I've been meaning to read for so long. It's just been sat there on the side and I kept putting it off. I kept thinking I don't have the time for this. I'll do it another time, You know how it goes. But last week I went on a little retreat in Wales to this cabin in the middle of nowhere, and I thought what better time to finally pick up this book and start working through it. So I thought I'd just make these sort of diaries that sort of document my journey with it and how I'm feeling as the weeks go by. So it's like a 12-week course essentially. So during that week I made my way through essentially the explanation of it all, the introduction, and I was noticing a lot of links to other spiritual books, specifically The Untethered Soul. I've really saw that as sort of the base, like the framework for basically every other self-help sort of book that I've read along the way. Honestly, most of the books seem to be just repeating sections from that book, just in a more niche and specified way. And I've got the idea that The Artist's Way so far is just a creative version of that, which really suits me. So I thought I'd just document my progress with it, because so far it seems like it's going to be really beneficial, and 1 week in it's already kind of feeling that way. I got my trusty yellow notebook here, and basically when I was reading through the introduction I was just making a bunch of I was making a bunch of notes before even starting the official week 1 section. I was just jotting down quotes and different thoughts I was having, and honestly just reading the introduction was actually giving me a lot of clarity and just sort of already giving me certain mindset shifts that I was looking for. Maybe stuff as well that I already knew but weren't quite focusing on as well. So the book focuses on healing your sort of creative child, or like if you're a blocked creative as it refers to. To give you some context, I relate to that, and I see myself as a sort of semi-blocked creative, if that makes sense, because I do make stuff like these YouTube videos and my music and I do put it out, but I also think I get into ruts where I'll overthink certain parts of a project and won't actually finish it. Like my album, for example, took me 3 years to actually get to a point where I felt like it was done. And as you know, if you're a creative, I don't think a project is ever truly done. I feel like I'm doing this a lot in this video, by the way, but it feels right, so we're gonna carry on. Projects never truly feel done. They just have to be done enough to put out. And I think that's something that reading just the introduction of this and completing week 1 has really taught me. It's to have confidence in your projects, to know that they're just a reflection of the certain time that they were being worked on in. And if you leave that for too long, it's either not going to be relevant anymore or you're going to feel blocked and not get on with the next project. So I've got my trusty yellow notebook, and I just thought I'd read out some quotes and certain thoughts that I had just to share this. Honestly, mostly for myself, but I thought I'd record this so if you get something from it as well, that's all the better. One thing that I really liked about The Artist's Way and just its sort of ethos and the whole mindset behind it was that it refers to creativity as a part of nature and something that's inevitable, and actually kind of describes it as our core state as humans. The way modern society has gone, it doesn't really encourage creativity. It actually pulls away from it with, you know, focusing on the 9 to 5 material possessions and how things look to other people. I think a lot of people get wrapped up in that, and actually creativity doesn't even come into that world. It says we are all innately creative, and I think that's 100% true. I think when you get into a flow state, you just lose track of time, and I think that is us going back to our true nature in a way. Like in my case as a musician, I can be writing or recording and I'll just completely get into it, come out of it with a full song, and maybe like 4 or 5 hours have passed sometimes and I've forgot to eat, but there's a full song there. That was just me getting completely into that flow state. I've got so many notes here, so I'm just going to pick some sort of highlights. To back that up as well, it says life is creative energy, pure creative energy. And it might sound all hippy dippy or whatever, but we are all creations at the end of the day. Everything you see in nature, that's a creation. I mean, some people read this kind of stuff and they might roll their eyes or whatever, but at the end of the day, that is true. So it makes complete sense for our creative projects to be a part of that natural cycle, essentially. As humans, as creations ourselves, we're going to want to carry that on and sort of give back to it as well. Another thing that the intro alone got me thinking about was sort of past trauma, which a lot of these books, like I say, The Untethered Soul, I always reference back to that one because that was the one that really resonated with me the most. But a lot of these books talk about past trauma, and it was the same in this one. It reminds you that it's not silly or embarrassing or even a waste of time to work on your creative projects, and that these negative beliefs might actually just come from your childhood, or it could be a parent or a friend or just someone you know telling you that like your creativity is a waste of time or whatever that is. So it reminded me that a lot of negative thoughts or stuff that affects my own creative confidence is probably just past trauma that's coming up now. And I think that's the core of what The Artist's Way is going to do. It's going to try and heal where those beliefs are coming from so that you can just get through it and fully just take on your creativity in the natural way that it wants to come out, which is the exact thing that I've been needing when I get into these certain ruts of things not being perfect or done or whatever it is. Again, more of these, but it never is done. That's why I'm referring to myself as a semi-blocked creative, because I get into periods where I'm like really creative and putting stuff out and not thinking too much about how it's being received or anything. I'm just naturally doing it for me, basically. And those times are great, but I always seem to fall back into this rut of overthinking stuff. So I think that overthinking comes from the past and beliefs that I have from then. So The Artist's Way is already clearing some of those up. I can already feel it. Another book that this is really reminding me of is Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, A Way of Being as well. And if you read that book, you know it's basically just a bunch of musings, and you can have your opinions on Rick Rubin, whether, you know, he's a real producer doing it again, whether his techniques actually work or if he's just, you know, laying down or whatever. I've seen a lot of memes on the internet about him, but I do think his ideas on creativity come from a really real place. So it was reminding me a lot of that. There was a part in his book about creative blockages happening, and if you leave a project too long, it becomes stale and not relevant, and then it starts to block the next project. And that's something that I've felt completely, even with my last album taking, you know, 3+ years to complete. There was definitely some parts in that where I was thinking, is this even worth it anymore? Does it feel relevant to me still? And luckily I did manage to get back that relevance in myself to the themes of the song, so it wasn't a waste in the end. I still feel connected to that, but it was on the edge, and I definitely relate to that and know it's a real thing. One huge concept that Julia Cameron talks about in The Artist's Way as well is this concept of the morning pages. And honestly, I've been doing this for just over a week now, and this is a game changer. It's essentially just journaling in the morning, but you just write essentially your stream of consciousness for around 3 pages. I've been doing more like 1 to 2 pages, but I just think the actual act of just writing what's on your mind and getting it out there onto a page is really clearing. As soon as I get on with my first task of the day, if it's creative or not, my brain feels more focused, because I can wake up in the morning and be quite busy in my mind because I'm either excited about getting on with something, or I'm nervous or anxious about it. So I think either way, if it's a positive or negative feeling, just doing these morning pages every single morning, first thing, just clears your mind for the day and gets you completely in the zone to work on whatever you're doing that day. I think vulnerability is a big part of this as well, and just opening yourself up to that, because I know creating something and putting that out, that is a vulnerable act to do as well. I thought in making this diary and putting it out there to the world, that's also a vulnerable act, and I'm just talking about my feelings of creativity as well. So I thought, what better way to force myself through that vulnerability and actually just put it out there to the world. And it'll be nice for me to look back on as well. So it's a win-win, really. I wish I could read my handwriting. It'd make this a lot easier. If I remove fear, I welcome flow. This was something that I wrote down after reading about creative recovery. I wrote down, to me, this means not creating out of waiting for inspiration to strike, but creating out of a natural flow. So essentially just getting into something and then the flow will naturally come to you, which I've experienced a few times as well. I can sometimes be putting off writing a song or sitting down to demo because I'm thinking, oh, is it going to be worth it? Is it going to be a good song? What if it turns out really bad? This is just fear in myself, and that's something that I recognise reading through this intro as well. These thoughts and this overthinking is actually based in fear. So if you remove that fear, you welcome in the flow that will naturally come anyway. And I noticed that if I do just force myself to go and sit in the chair and pick up the guitar, a song usually comes out of it. If I think that song's good or bad, it changes, but at the end of the day, creativity happened. That was the flow coming out of me. If I liked it or not is a different story, but the flow still happened, and that's what matters here. And the more you get into that flow, the more good stuff will eventually come out of it. That's just the odds. I also wrote the good stuff will come from vulnerability and authenticity, which comes from letting go of this fear as well. And it really relates to this sort of series I'm making with these diaries, because this channel is where a lot of my creative projects live. So by opening myself up to this vulnerability here, it seems really fitting. And hopefully you can relate to this or get something from it, or just share stuff in the comments as well. I absolutely love the community that this channel brings. So let me know your thoughts on this, and if it sparked anything in your brain as well, I'd love to hear it. A lot of the reviews I've seen on this book refer to it as being too religious, but I mean, the book even says itself, it's not about religion, it's more about spirituality, which I know those two words can sound similar, but to me they're very different. I personally wouldn't say that I'm religious, but I'd say that I have an interest in spirituality, and I think that is something that is naturally within all of us. I think it's more about changing your mindset and allowing this natural creative energy to flow through you, and I don't think that's necessarily a religious thing. The book refers to God, but I think you can refer to that however you want. I personally like to think of it as source, like this source of energy that's just naturally in the universe in some way. But I don't see that as a man in the sky, for example. I don't think this idea of God has to be what we've been taught growing up, or, you know, the cliche man in the sky thing. I think it can just be a natural flow that exists between us all and through us all. And again, this might be sounding hippy dippy, but when you get into a flow state and you start to experience more of that, there must be something right. We're only human. I think it would be really entitled to assume that we can figure out the whole universe. Like, this place is huge. So when I say that I'm a semi-blocked creative, it's because I live a creative life, but I definitely fall into a trap sometimes where I tell myself, oh, that it's not worth working on that project for myself, or nobody will care if I do this, or whatever other negative thing that I'm telling myself. It will stop me from actually getting people involved with my creative projects, because I tell myself like, oh, it's not worth getting other people's time involved. And then what the morning pages and the affirmations that this book offers have sort of reminded to myself is that that's just negative beliefs that are actually holding me back. It's almost like this fear again. It's almost like I'm scared and stopping myself from being successful because I'm telling myself it's not worth it, as if it's like easier that way, which it does feel easier to make excuses. But when you really break it down, that's where the blockages are actually coming from. Because if I keep affirming these negative beliefs in myself, I'm never actually going to reach my full potential and get these things in my brain out into the world in the way that I actually see them. Every creative project I ever do is therefore going to be falling just short of the actual full potential that I have for it. And that's really not good. I really like this quote as well. Stop telling yourself that creativity is a luxury and that you should be grateful for what you've got. I just thought this is another excuse to not develop your own personal creativity. And it makes sense. I think somewhere in our brain it tells you that that's the safer option, but I think the word safe in this case actually means stale, because you're never actually going to develop the things that you have this calling to do inside you somewhere. Some more stuff on the morning pages. So the morning pages are not meant to be art. They're not meant to be creative in any way. They're just meant to get all the shit in your brain out of your brain and onto that page. It talks about the logic brain versus the artist brain as well. And the logic brain is that safe brain that I've sort of been talking about. And the artist brain is the brain that wants to just play and explore things and like figure things out and try new things out. But the logic brain will always be against the artist brain, because it doesn't make logical sense to want to play and, you know, take creative risks and just like put yourself out there in this way. It feels scary. And that's where the fear comes from, I think. Another thing was the artist dates, which I've done a few times this week. I've realised that I actually naturally do this in my own life because I skate, and I'll skate a few times a week by myself too, which is, I find, really therapeutic actually. I can just focus on tricks and focus on the natural flow of skating as well. And skating is actually really creative in itself as well. It's just pure expression really. So at least once, twice a week, I'll go and do that. So naturally, I have these artist dates built into my life, which I was quite happy to find out really, because I didn't realise just how much that was actually helping me. Because when I'm doing that, and whether that's going to a coffee shop or going skating or doing whatever your hobby is, I feel like just having that space for your brain to just flow and not actually be fully switched on the whole time. I'll actually have more creative ideas come through when I'm skating than if I'm actually sat at a computer or at a notepad trying to actually make things happen. Because the best thing for a creative brain is to be bored. I don't know whose quote that was, but I've heard some version of that quote before. And I think it's completely true. We need time for these ideas to just come into us, because again, there is a natural flow and a natural creative energy that's sort of working beyond us, I believe. And I think if you can allow yourself to be bored or do something other than the creative project that you're trying to create at that time, those ideas seem to be more effortless and less forced, which actually makes the project way better than it would be if you did force it out. I think this links back to this whole idea of the artist child or the inner child, or however you want to explain that sort of playful part of you where you get into that flow state and just let things happen comes from. I relate this back to my own projects, and if that's working with my band or on my own stuff, the most alive I feel in those moments is when I feel the most childlike. It's when I'm writing with the band and we're experimenting with like a certain sound or a certain pedal or a certain part of a song, or we're doing something that pushes what we've done before, and we'll just be laughing the whole time, it feels like, because we feel like we're doing something that's outrageous. But really that's just our artist child or our inner child's just fully interacting with each other and going, oh, let's just try this, let's just try this. And I think the reason it feels so funny is because it does feel like play, but at the same time it feels like progress and it feels like authenticity as well. And I think there's some combination of those feelings that comes out in laughter sometimes, or comes out in some kind of rush of energy, which is expressed however you express it. In the case of my band Cartoon Head, usually that's just laughter or just chatting shit. I think it's why a lot of times you'll hear musicians on stage like, you know, shouting like mid-song, or if like another artist done something good, they'll like shout a big whoop or something. I think it's because that is just a rush of energy that comes through when you feel like you're locked in, especially when you're locked in with other people, like musicians, for example. There's something that happens when you just fully sync up, and that feeling is just like no other, really. I absolutely love this idea as well of filling the well. It says that art is an image using system, and it's not talking about like visual images specifically, it's talking about just having this like reference database in your mind of other creative stuff. So So it's basically like healthy consuming of other art. Kind of sounds backwards in a way, but how can you create original stuff without having other stuff to base that off and piece together into something that is brand new? It says that we need to restock or like replenish our pool of images to maintain a really good creative flow. A part that really resonated with me about this is that that pool can actually dry up while you feel most creative. And it sounds weird at first, but that makes complete sense, because when you're in those highly creative zones and you're actually, you know, creating a whole lot, you're obviously using up a lot of those stored images that you have. And like I said, those images don't have to be visual. They could be emotions or moments or like snapshots of the past or just some other creative project that you've seen recently that you really resonated with. But if you're in those highly charged creative flow moments, you're actually using a lot of those snapshots or those images in that moment to create your original thing. So it makes sense that that's when it would get drained and you'd actually feel a blockage, because that's the time when you're using up your sort of resources in your mind. Art may seem to spring from pain, but perhaps this is because pain comes to focus our attention onto details. This resonated with me as well, because it can seem like, oh, you have to be this starving artist that's going through a lot of pain to create anything of worth. But really, I think it is just attention to detail that pain brings. That's the purpose of pain. Think of pain in the physical body. All that's doing is telling your brain that, for example, oh, your foot hurts. That's just your brain's way of telling you that there's an issue there. It's bringing your attention to that detail. So essentially, when this comes to art, the detail that sticks becomes the root of that art or that creative project, whatever it is you're doing. Audacity, not talent, makes a person an artist and another a shadow artist. And you hear people moan a lot, especially with music artists. They'll be like, how did they even get big? Like, their music's not that good, or whatever stupid excuse they've come up with in that moment. The reason that they are where they're at, if they're not a nepo baby, that is usually because they had the audacity to believe in themselves and actually go for it and not stop. And that kind of explains why sometimes you hear people say, oh, how did they get big? They're not even good, or whatever it is. It's because they believed in themselves at the end of the day. And usually you hear this come from people who don't believe fully in themselves, and maybe it's coming from a place of jealousy or insecurity in their own work or their own lack of creative output. That might be because of this insecurity and fear. I've definitely noticed that in myself a couple of times, and that's something that I've been working on myself over the years, is to basically have no excuses. If you're not getting somewhere, that's because maybe you need to do more, or you need to go through a book like this and get over the blockages that are creating those feelings. Right, I feel like this video is going to be super long, but essentially that was just my thoughts of reading the introduction to this book, and it really did spark a lot of thoughts in me. As you know from this diary, it's just brought up a lot of things from, even like I said, other books that have all tied together and made a lot more sense and gave me a lot more clarity in my creative endeavours as well. I'm really liking how angled at creativity this book is. I know that's the whole point. Literally the rest of the title is a spiritual path to higher creativity. I've needed a sort of spiritual guidebook in a more creatively focused way, and this is really suiting that so far. So I guess to recap week 1, I've done the morning pages every day except for yesterday, I think it was, but I did the evening pages, I called it, because I just completely forgot in the morning. You know, some mornings are like that, you just wake up and you've got to get on with a million things, and I just forgot, so I ended up just doing it on the night. And you know, it's still beneficial to get your thoughts out. Maybe it did some good to get it out after a busy day as well. So I completed all my tasks as well. I actually did a lot of those this morning because I've just been focusing on really getting the morning pages down this week. I know myself, if I put too much on my plate, then I'll probably start to avoid it because I'll just get overwhelmed. I took myself on a couple of these artist dates that it mentions. That's mostly skateboarding for me, but that's therapeutic. List out 3 old enemies of your creative self-worth and be specific. So this was just basically that inner child work for me, going back to why I believe some of these negative beliefs that are in my sort of mindset. And it already helped, just writing it out felt really healing, so I completed that one. Select and write 1 horror story from your monster hall of fame, as it calls it. So basically this was just a negative thing that happened in the past that affected my creative self-worth, and I just basically went through the details. And I think in doing that, you start to create connections in your brain from the past to the future of why you have these beliefs now and where that comes from. And it's like, I think the more that I do that kind of stuff, the more that sort of trauma from the past of stuff that affects me now will just start to go away, or at least I'll understand it more and stop those negative beliefs right as they happen. List 3 old champions of your creative self-worth, your hall of champions. I picked these because it felt like it would flow really well, basically going through some past stuff and then jump into some positive stuff from the past and the present as well. I wrote down 3 people that have really supported my creative endeavours over the years, and that felt really good to do. Select and write out 1 piece of encouragement, write a thank you letter and consider sending it to the person. It just reinforced that there are people out there supporting you and people that really love and care about you as well, which is obviously just important as a human to know that and to really reinforce it. And I don't think we really focus on that too much because we can give a lot to other people. So it was nice to look back through old messages and just sort of think about nice stuff that's been said about me in the past and just reinforce that a little bit and pay some attention to it. So that's pretty much it. Week 1 of the Artist's Way. I've noticed a lot of benefits, as you might be able to tell from this video. It's Monday now, so I'm going to sit through and read what I've got to do for week 2 now. But yeah, so far, completely recommend it. Even just the morning pages alone have created so much clarity in my creative work and just in my life in general for this week or so. So yeah, sorry if this video is like an hour long. I feel like I've just been chatting a lot. That's what this does. It brings up a lot of stuff for you to sort of work through and just a lot of stuff to create clarity in your creative work. So far, it's incredible. I guess I'll see you on the next one if this ever sees the light of day. But either way, it's good for me. But if it does see the light of day, then thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments because I feel like there's a lot here that can be discussed. And I'd love to know some of your methods in creativity and just the mindset behind it as well. So I guess I'll see you on week 2.